Chapter 18. As the rishi finished, a number of people walked toward our camp, and Jesus was in the group. We had noted that they had gathered on the slope of the ridge a short distance from the camp, but had supposed that they were gathering for a private conference, as these gatherings were in evidence all about the countryside. As they approached, Weldon arose, stepped forward, and clasped both of Jesus' hands. There was no need for introduction, as they were all close friends of the rishi and Jesus. As for ourselves, we felt like the little atoms ready to take root in any niche where soil presented itself. All gathered around our campfire. Weldon asked Jesus if he would talk to us of the Bible. This met with a most hearty approval from all, and Jesus began, "Let us consider David's prayer in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." You will note this was not a prayer of supplication. Do you not see that the real meaning implies that the one great principle is leading us into the way we should go, or great principle goes before on our pathway, and thus we make the crooked places straight? This principle prepares our pathway as a shepherd does for his trusting and dependent sheep. Thus we can say, "Where our Father leads, I am unafraid." The Good Shepherd knows where everything is located that is good for his sheep. Thus we can say, "I shall not want." With David, we can say, "I cannot want, for I am is guarded against every ill." Every want of our physical nature is supplied. Not only shall we be well fed in the green pastures, but there will be an abundance to spare. We rest in complete assurance that every desire is already fulfilled and provided for. We can let go of every weary sense and say, with David, "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters." The blue of their quiet depths gives great peace to our minds, and our troubled consciousness is stilled. With body and mind at rest, the heavenly inspiration of the Most High principle floods our souls with the pure light of life and power. The light within us glows with the glory of my Lord, the law wherein we are all one. The radiant light of Spirit renews our understanding. We stand revealed to our true selves, so that we know ourselves as one with the infinite, and each is sent from the principle to the manifest, the perfection of the Father principle. In the quiet calm of our souls, we are restored to our pure selves, and know that we are whole. Thus, He restoreth my soul. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. In the fullness of the bounty of this God principle, what can we fear? Here we rest our physical natures. God quiets our minds. God rests our souls. God illumines us for service. Therefore, with this perfect preparation from within, what outer tests could cause us to fear that any evil thing could harm us? God is in the midst of every one of us. To each He is an ever-present help in time of trouble. In Him we live and move and have our being. We say with one voice, "All is well." Now each can say, "God love leads me directly into the fold. I'm shown the right path and corrected. When I stray from this fold, the power of God love attracts me to my good. Thus all that would harm is shut from me." Now with David, each can say, "For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." In first taking up this work and perceiving the truths, or the fundamental scientific facts underlying all life, and the way of attaining thereto, you take the first step, and the exhilaration and enlightenment are so far beyond anything you have hitherto experienced, that you decide to go on in the work. Then doubts, fears, and discouragements are allowed to creep in, and your ongoing seems to be retarded. You struggle first one way, then another, and you seem to be losing ground. The struggle seems to be too great for human beings to accomplish, and you begin to look at the failures all about you. You say God's children are dying on every hand, and none within your generation has accomplished the ideal of everlasting and eternal life, peace, harmony, and perfection, which I idealize. You say that accomplishment must come after death, so you let go and find for a time that it is much easier to drift on and on with the human tide on the downward trend. Again, the race consciousness has had another setback. Another who had a great spiritual enlightenment and understanding and could have such succeeded has failed, and the race consciousness has another binding hold upon humanity. Generation after generation gives it a still greater and tenacious grip. Is it any wonder that human nature becomes weak and frail, and each in turn follows on and on, in the same eternal treadmill, the blind following the blind, on and on into eternal oblivion, and into the great vortex, where not only the body is forced into dissolution and decay, but the soul is ground between the never relenting millstones of human perception and mistakes. If you would realize, as I did, and so many have done, that it is far easier to work out your own problem in one earthly experience than it is to go on and accumulate a race of consciousness of good and evil that soon becomes an encrusted shell that has been added to layer by layer upon an incrustation by each succeeding experience, until it takes superhuman force and sledgehammer blows to break the shell and release your true self. Until you do break the shell and release your true self, you will continue to be ground in the same vortex. You can work until you have released yourself sufficiently to get a glimpse of the horizon's grander view. Here again you cease to struggle, your mental vision is cleared, but your body is still encased in the shell. Realize that the newborn chick, when its head is free from its shell, must still go on with the struggle. It must be entirely free from its old shell or environment before it can grow into the new, which it has sensed and perceived as soon as it has broken the hole through the shell once encasing the egg from which it grew. You fail utterly to see that I, as a boy working at the carpenter's bench with my father, perceived that there was a higher life for the God-born so-called human being than to be born into a human existence for a short time, and during that short existence be ground between the millstones of man-made laws, superstitions, and conventions, and thus struggle on through that existence for perhaps 60 years and 10, then pass on to a heaven and a glorious reward of harps and psalm singing that could have no logical existence except in the gullible minds of those preyed upon by priesthood of my day. You fail utterly to see that, after this great awakening or realization within myself, it took long days and nights of struggle in seclusion and silence, all alone, right within myself and with myself. Then, when the self was conquered, it took the far greater and more bitter experiences of personal contact with those I loved dearly and to whom I wished to show the light, that I had perceived, knowing it was the light that burns so brightly, lighting the path of every child of God that is created or that comes into the world. You fail utterly to see the great temptation that beset me to go on and be the carpenter I may have been, and thence live the short lifespan of life allotted to man by hierarchy and orthodoxy, instead of taking up a life which perception had only given me a glimpse of, thus allowing me to see through the murk and mire of superstition, discord, and disbelief. You fail utterly to follow the bodily anguish, the ignominious insults that were heaped upon me by my own kin alone, aside from those to whom I strove to show the light I have perceived. You fail to see that this took a will stronger than my own, which sustained me through these trials. How little you can know of the trials and struggles, temptations and defeats that beset me. How at times I struggled on and on with clenched fists and set teeth, seeing and knowing that the light was there, although there seemed to be but one last flickering ray, and at times it seemed that that last ray had gone out, a shadow was cast in its place. Even then, something within me was ever strong and dominant. That back of the shadow, the light was as bright as ever. I went on and cast aside the shadow and found the light burning even brighter because of the temporary dimming, even when the shadow proved to be the cross, and I could see beyond. The final awakening of a triumphant morn that passed beyond the understanding of mortal man, still immersed in fear, doubts, and superstitions. It was the very urge of this perception that set me on, determined to drink the cup to the fullest draught, that I might know by actual experience and contact whereof I spoke, that man by the free will of God, coupled with his own free thought and pure motive, could prove for himself alone that God is divine, and that man, his true son, born in his image and likeness, is as truly divine as the Father is divine, and that this divinity is the true Christ that every man sees and perceives is in himself and in all of God's children. This true Christ is the light that lights every child that comes into the world, is the Christ of God our Father, in, through, and by whom we all have everlasting life, light, love, and true brotherhood, the true fatherhood, the true sonship of God and man. In the light of this true understanding or truth, you do not need a king, a queen, a crown, a pope, or a priest. You, in the true perception, are the king, the queen, the pope, the priest, and none but yourself and God stand alone. You expand this true perception to take in the whole universe of form and shape. With your God given creative ability, you surround them with the perfection that God sees and surrounds them with. End of chapter 18. Addendum. The word araya means cultured, refined, noble. Aryavarta was the land wherein the people gave great heed to race culture. Aryabhava was the ancient name for the highest virtue. Aryamarga was the path to noble life. These precepts have been handed down through eons of time. In ancient India, culture was most human in its outlook, the thought of being great men for a great country. Hence we find a great people, complete brotherhood, true love, and reverence for each human unit, truly humble souls knowing that all are God, This could in no way become another name for strife and contention. It must become the dominant factor in its essential relationship toward the building of true world consciousness. The Orions dreamed and philosophized, yet their dreams were most real. They not only dreamed of God, they knew that God was actually enthroned in the hearts and lives of all mankind, as a true and beautiful in every human unit. Is there an intelligent man that does not have such a philosophy, a viewpoint, or attitude toward the world? What better attitude could there be than viewing the world through the eyes of the God-man? Is it not through this attitude that all humanity lives richer and more harmonious lives? The Orion message is, build up your manhood and womanhood, and you build up all humanity. By so doing, you avoid the so-called sins against the body. Through the accomplishments of this ideal, you realize the supreme opportunity of earth pilgrimage, and with the right sense of proportion, the rich powers of youth are laid as an offering at the mother's shrine. Thus you find the key to the kingdom of heaven right within your own soul, just as you did 1,000 or 1,000,000 years back and will do in the years to come. This can be accomplished here and now, or you can go on and plow through materiality on its network of roads and through its network of thoughts until you eventually reach the same central white light which is against spirit, the Christ in every one, the truth made manifest unto you. This is the ultimate for all races, all creeds, all religions, the fatherhood and the motherhood of God. Once self-mastery is attained, the master leads on and on, ever on. The Orion manhood guarded Orion culture. The Orion womanhood has been the greatest guardian of this culture. All through the ages, she has nourished the moral, social, and political life. Her intuitions and mysticism of sympathy have always stood as the great bulwark of the Orion ideal. Aristotle asked that an Indian teacher versed in the ancient teachings and culture of India be brought to him, a teacher that in the noblest sense could be called a true man, physically strong, intellectually and morally refined. It is God's promise that prayer is always answered. I say unto you, ask and it is given unto you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it is opened unto you. For every one that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened. In other words, the Christ admonishes us. When principle says, yes, refuse to take. No, no does not have its origin in God, but in our own failure to believe in God's promise. The God's promise to man never fails, but how few can stand the test of knowing, how few can meet every trial by knowing God until the Christ of God is released within them. What an invitation to constantly know God! What an appeal for definiteness and persistency! God principle always bears with its own, those ready to receive the highest understanding, as they cry out for deliverance from their adversaries. They know it is only for their future purification and enlightenment. Thus they realize that the adversary is a friend, as the adversary compels their unceasing search for God principle. The promise is, principle cannot break its own law. We ask for strength to erase the evil thought that law can be broken, or that there is a power that can oppose God power. As God is all power, God must answer prayer. God is the only word. It cannot fail. End of Addendum. End of Volume 3.